When the spawn meets world, when the spawn meets world.
What up, bros?
What up, bro?
I literally thought your mic went out. And welcome to Bro Meets World.
What is Bro Meets World?
We're doing a little extra credit episode, I guess you could say.
Ooh, okay, yeah, I like that.
Because there has been a little bit of buzz in the Boy Meets World community about the thing TC and I love to discuss, racism.
Well, it's interesting because there seems to be an entire journey that took place in this racism, and I feel like it deserves a conversation.
Completely. That's why I wanted to do this little standalone. I wanted to address it sooner rather than later. And I just thought it brought up very interesting things, not only with what happened, but how people are talking about it. And I don't know about you, but like, because we do this podcast, I got so many people send me the article. And of course, we were having discussions about how they felt about it. So I thought it was worth sharing with our listeners.
Bruh, how about this? How about you give them why don't you tell them about it? About the news, not so much the episode, but we want the news, not the weather, you know?
So, for those of you who don't know, this is a little ahead of us and where we are with the series, but actress Trini McGee, who plays Angela in the series later on, who is our first real person of color who is kind of co-starring in the show. And she's also, if I believe, this is the first mainstream interracial relationship on a teen show, Angela and Sean.
Well, I mean, that depends if you consider Screech and Lisa a couple at any point.
They weren't. I don't think stalking or like, I think that's just what it's like, infatuation. But they were the first, I'll say, confirmed or mutual couple.
I mean, they were the first interracial couple for the show, at the very least. I mean,
but even on primetime, it was a really big deal, and you just didn't see things like interracial couples on television, especially on primetime, especially in teen shows at the time.
As Siege was saying, we're not quite at this point in our podcast to talk about Angela's appearance, but just as a quick disclaimer, Angela comes on as a love interest to Sean. She is with him for several seasons, and then before the series ends, she and her father, who is in the military, go to Europe, and Sean is left heartbroken. The series finale is the next episode. He decides to go to New York with Corey and Topanga, and then in Girl Meets World, she resurfaces. They have a discussion about why they could never work, and then Sean goes on to marry Maya's mother.
Correct.
Question mark? Yes. So that is the entire story of Sean and Angela.
So since that time, Trina McGee was interviewed, and she mentioned, or I guess she really just wrote on Twitter. She said she was called Aunt Jemima. She's like, called Aunt Jemima on set during hair and makeup, called a bitter bitch when I quietly waited for my scene to finish rehearsing that was being effed up over and over due to episodes featuring my character. Told it was nice of you to join us like a stranger after 60 episodes. She said in a later tweet, I did my job and I expect my due. At times, the tensions of the disrespect was extremely stressful. 25 years old at the time, raising a family, and did not deserve to be thinking about this. None of those 3 colleagues had children, just cowardly egos and hot diarrhea mouths. She later went on to identify the 3 individuals who she said were doing these microaggressions or racist comments, and that was Will Friedle, Danielle Fishel, and Ben Savage. She thought it very important to point out that Ryder Strong she never had any issues with. He was very supportive and above board, the way we would like to think.
Well, something else that was made clear was that since these tweets have come out, and even I believe prior to the tweets coming out, she did get apologies from Will Friedle. I believe she said she even got a 3-page written note from him afterwards, just about how uneducated he was, and how his speech could be interpreted in ways that he didn't intend to, just because of where he was in his own ignorance. And so it seems as though there's been a peace made there. I'm not sure, but that's just another part of the story I thought important to add in.
And I also think it's important to note that she later took back her comments and said that she was PMSing and that she shouldn't have been, that she didn't think it was as bad as it was coming off, and that she basically just kind of recanted the accusations shortly after. So it was a real roller coaster of emotions and gossip. But I wanted to talk about the whole thing because I had thoughts the moment I heard the story, and then I had thoughts again after she recanted. So I. What do you think, TC? How do you feel about all of this?
Well, I'll have to say, as someone who knows the show pretty intimately and knows the dynamic between Angela, between the rest of the cast, it always seemed like she was a little bit of an outsider. There's an episode where um, Corey is confronted by Angela because she says, "You know what? We were never friends. I was always friends with Topanga or Sean, and me and you never had any kind of relationship." And then they have like a bullshit friendship for one episode that ends up going away again. They get rid of her character, like I said, the episode before the series finale. So the series finale, when everyone's having these amazing send-offs with these like video montages of how their characters grown over the years, Angela's excluded from all of that because they kicked her off early. It just felt like someone who would get a thank you very much for coming on to our show after 60 episodes vibe.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. It's interesting because first I want to say, having done our podcast and having rewatching this show, I was not surprised at all by her accusations. I thought, based on what we've seen and kind of the culture and the jokes that are being made and what just seemed normal at the time, including the immaturity of the three actors, I was not surprised. I thought it unfortunate to be true, and I thought it very uh, unf- like disturbing that she had to live with these things and kind of go through it on her own. But it made complete sense to me, knowing what we know and having rewatched the series so far.
Well,
And
see, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, she was the first black girl in Philadelphia, according to Boy Meets World. Like, it's gonna be a hard struggle for her.
Yeah, exactly. And then I did think that what she was saying from the beginning, like comments like Aunt Jemima and about her hair and all this other stuff, they seemed more like microaggressions and passive racism than like targeted racism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was how I felt from the beginning. So to see her clarify and start to call them microaggressions, I felt did add color to the situation.
Yeah, because it wasn't this like grand reveal of like inner racism. It was just that like a bunch of privileged white kids in the early 90s made some jokes that they didn't really think through, and they probably rubbed her the wrong way. We've all been there. But when we talk about it amongst us, we get the levity of it. When you're just reading it in tweets, it doesn't get communicated so well.
Exactly. I mean, because again, people immediately messaged me and they were like, "Oh, did you see this? What do you think?" And I was like, "This is not to dismiss her claims at all, but it was very much like I feel that." Especially with stuff like the Aunt Jemima comment and all this other stuff, she has every right to feel targeted and isolated and made other during the situation. But also, this is the 90s when we're making gay jokes left and right. We're making trans jokes left and right.
The 90s was a time for point at you humor. Like that was
Yes,
really a thing that was happening with stand-up comics too, where like half their set would be jokes and the other half would just be D.L. Hughley pointing at people in the audience and being like, look at how funny this person is because of yada yada yada. And that's just what humor was for a strange portion of time before bullying became a thing.
Yeah, and I think that I agree, and I'm glad that we are in the situation where people are more mindful now. But I wasn't surprised, especially considering the age group that they were all dealing with. She was in fact older. Angela is played by an older actress than the rest of the cast, so it made sense to me that at least the three stars who she targeted for saying these things would say such ignorant things at that age. That being said, to hear that the adults in the room didn't really step up was really
Or
upsetting.
give her her due for what she's contributed to the show.
Exactly. I think it's very easy, and it's also very common for Black people and Black artists to be dismissed for the kind of groundbreaking work that they do, because to other people, it's not seen as big of a deal as it is.
Well, and also, if you've listened to our podcast a bit, we have pointed out that there have been several times in which a person of a specific race is brought on specifically to pander or to represent a stereotype. And it feels as though this is confirmation of sorts that her character was always kind of thought of as a token
Yes.
ethnicity to fill in a slot. Like we need a little diversity on this cast. Let's throw in Trini. You know what I mean? Like it feels like that's been confirmed.
Yeah, and I will say that not only is it a hard time in the 90s because we're dealing with race kind of for the first time in a colorblind world on network television. So much so that like Friends doesn't even have any one of the main characters date a person of color until late into their seasons. The
Post
idea,
9/11.
yeah, post 9/11. It started in 94 and then it was like after 9/11 that they even had their main characters date a person of color. It's very easy for them to, or for me to see the writers consider themselves as trailblazers just for having a Black actress and not really giving her her due or respecting her presence.
It's interesting too to hear that she's had communications with Will Friedle because I feel like that's kind of an interesting portion of this to know that at some point he in his own journey of just being a white man has realized that maybe in his own privilege he has slighted others and he's had like an educational moment where he's like, you know what, I've kind of learned from that and learned that that maybe wasn't so cool, and I'm so sorry about how it came off. I mean, I don't know exactly what he said to her, but just for him to acknowledge his growth and his understanding of what's going on, I think it's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, I would definitely. Also, I think I'm more forgiving because kind of have we've talked about before, just with the show in general. It was made in a different time, and that's not to excuse anyone, but you and I, who are people of color from the South, we had a different way of thinking and expressing ourselves. Not too long ago, like this whole idea of microaggressions and standing up for your identity and not letting yourself be or your own voice be squandered. It's all of this is relatively new in culture.
I would challenge any black person to name a job in which they didn't experience some sort of microaggression.
Exactly.
Like
That's
it's
what I'm saying.
really been a thing I've experienced in every point of my life in any career I've ever had. It's always been there.
Yeah, and a lot of times you do just kind of have to take a deep breath and move forward, But the idea that in the 90s it was so bad to where it made her feel, like remember it for years on end, is different. But I just think that now we have the tools and the voice and the understanding as a nation to kind of address it in a way we would not have almost 30 years ago.
Also, in the articles that are floating around about this, they're including recent photos of her. She's 50 years old and black do not crack. She looks great.
What do you think about her blaming all of this on PMS and kind of like the um, backtracking of the accusations? What was your
Uh,
thoughts?
I think that that was a two steps forward, 5 steps back kind of situation. I don't know. Like I feel like to dismiss anything as PMS is to dismiss like vocal women sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. Maybe I think what she was just meaning it to say was that maybe it came across stronger than what she meant it to say, and that there was just a communication error there. But yeah, I don't. There's better ways to say that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that's something that I thought was unfortunate. I really wish that she had either clarified it without mentioning PMS at all, or
Because it dismisses the whole thing. Like whenever like you hear a guy being like, "Oh yeah, you know how she is when she's on the rag," just kind of dismiss like, all right, just ignore her. When she gets her head back to normal, she'll start thinking clearly. Like that's the concept of that whole PMS comment. So like for her to throw it on comments that reflect real life microaggressions that were acknowledged by other people in the cast, it's not the same thing.
yeah, I agree. Like, for me, it was kind of like, as you said, with the 5 steps back, it was like not only harmful for her argument, which was, as a person of color in the industry and microaggressions, but then using PMS, it was also women in general. So it was, it was just a way to really undermine both minority groups, um, during a time when we are already being dismissed and, fighting for being heard and, being understood.
Sure.
So yeah, I thought it was really unfortunate that she did that, but I think it also shows that people of color are also flawed and they also deserve forgiveness and time to, um, I don't know, move forward, be progressive. I don't know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
express.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I agree. It's a very interesting that we're having this conversation now because I feel like maybe this got more attention because we're in quarantine because we have nothing else to really focus on that this story got to. I know like you, like I got a bunch of messages from people being like, check this out. And maybe, us being bored as a people right now are we're contributing to this being a bigger deal than it is.
No, I don't. I mean, that's part of it, but I also feel like this would have been something anyway. You have a actress from one of the most, at least as far as we remember, wholesome TV shows, talking about racism and being called things like Aunt Jemima. I could definitely see this still being a news story during any other time.
I want to bring this. I want to talk about this more later when we are watching the Angela episodes because, as far as I know, Boy Meets World doesn't approach racism at all with Angela. Like they have every opportunity to. They have no interaction between Angela and Sean's dad. Like she never has that interaction, which could have been a good one to introduce some racism in. There's none of that. They're colorblind. We don't see race in their
Yeah,
approach to her, and I just think that that's somehow even more toxic.
yeah, and it's actually really funny. I love that you said I never thought about the fact that, as far as I know, Angela never meets Chet, and I wonder if they did just avoid that. To they were like, we do not want to introduce this character. Is there anything else you want to? I thought it was fun that we address it and kind of get our opinions out.
This is separate, but I saw the first IG live between Will Friedle and Jason Marsden, and it was highly disappointing because I don't think they understood the concept of IG live. People were asking questions, and they weren't answering any of the questions. They didn't talk about any of their old projects. They didn't really do anything but just talk about what they've been doing under quarantine. It seemed like a conversation they were having without realizing other people were watching it. So yeah, it was a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I think that, I've seen that a lot with just like, these. I don't know if you've seen these hip hop battles or whatever, but, a lot of people are learning
Are you
technology for the
talking
first
about
time.
fucking Teddy Riley and Babyface?
Yeah.
Because that's my life right now.
So yeah, it seemed like a lot of people were, learning new technology for the first time, and we're gonna get a lot more of that.
Sure, sure.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to this little excerpt. You can check out our next episode right after this.
Later, bros.
Later, bros.